Montana Territory, 1883. The morning frost still clung to the grass when the wagon wheel snapped, throwing Violet Norwood face first into the cold dirt. Again came the exasperated voice of Mrs. Dallow, the butcher's wife, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You are the clumsiest girl I have ever met." Violet pushed herself up, brushing the mud from her apron, though her cheek stung and her elbow throbbed. The crate of carrots she had been carrying had spilled into the dust beside her, and already folks passing through the open-air market in Fort Benton were stepping around her like she was a stray dog. She kept her chin down and started gathering the carrots with trembling fingers. "You are lucky I even keep you on," Mrs. Dallow muttered, loud enough for half the street to hear. "No one else would, not with your track record." Violet swallowed hard and nodded, blinking fast. Her knees were scraped raw beneath her skirt. She had lost count of the bruises she carried. Not from cruelty, just from what people called her nature. Too clumsy, too slow, too much trouble. She did not argue anymore. She just tried to be useful, but someone knelt beside her. Large, steady hands helped gather the last of the carrots. She glanced up and met eyes the color of summer wheat. "You all right?" the stranger asked, his voice low and warm. His hat cast a shadow across his face, but even then she could see the concern was real. "I am fine," she whispered, startled by the steadiness in him. He gave a small nod, then stood and offered her the last carrot. "Better let me fix that wheel before someone else ends up in the dirt," Mrs. Dallow snorted. "And who might you be?" The man rested a hand on the broken wheel, inspecting it with a practiced eye. "Name's Jasper Ellery, just rode in from Helena, looking for a ranch to work." "But I know wagons well enough." "You are a cowboy?" Mrs. Dallow asked, suspicious. "I work cattle, fix fences, ride well, and I do not mind helping a lady off the ground." His eyes flicked back to Violet, softer now. "Especially one who does not deserve the tone you are using, Mrs." Dallow's face pinched. "She is just clumsy." "Well," Jasper said, kneeling again and pulling a tool from his saddlebag, "seems to me clumsy folks deserve a little more grace." Violet's breath caught in her chest. She had never heard anyone say that before. By midday, the wheel was fixed, the carrots were clean, and the market had gone quiet enough for Violet to sit on the edge of the wagon bed. She did not say much, never did, but Jasper sat beside her with an easy stillness, like silence never made him uncomfortable. He removed his hat, letting the breeze touch his dark hair. "You live here?" She nodded. "In a small room behind the bakery. I make deliveries, help out." He glanced at her elbow. "You are bleeding." She looked down. The scrape had soaked through her sleeve. She had not noticed. Jasper gently pulled a clean cloth from his coat pocket and wrapped it around her arm. "You should not ignore pain." "I am used to it," she said before she could stop herself. His hands stilled. She looked up, startled by the weight in his stare. "No one should be used to pain," he said. She swallowed, heart thudding. "It is nothing serious." "Nothing serious leaves marks like that," he said quietly, and she realized he had seen the bruises on her arms, the ones she tried to hide. "I just fall. A lot," she whispered. He nodded slowly. "Then maybe someone should be there to catch you." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. She turned her face away, ashamed, but Jasper did not flinch. He sat beside her, quiet and steady. Later, when he went to mount his horse, she surprised herself by calling out. "Wait," he turned, brows raised. "If you are really looking for work, there is a ranch northeast of here. The Norwood place. It belonged to my father. He passed 2 years ago and the cattle have gone wild. It is falling apart, but there is a house still standing. Someone needs to bring it back to life." "You own it," she nodded. I do not know how to run it." "I do," he said without hesitation. "If you let me." She blinked. "You would help." "I will do more than that," he said. "I will stay." By the end of the week, Jasper had moved into the ranch house. He patched the roof, cleared the paddock, and repaired the fences. Violet came out after her bakery shifts with loaves of bread tucked into her bag, and he always had coffee waiting. He never asked for more than she could give, never pushed. But he saw her. He saw how she flinched around sudden noises, how she apologized before she spoke, how her hands trembled when someone raised their voice, even if it was not at her, and he never looked away. One evening, she tripped on the porch step and went down hard on her knees. Before she could scramble back up, Jasper was there, kneeling beside her, hands gentle against her arms. "You are not broken," he said firmly. "You are just bruised." She looked up, tears slipping down her cheeks. He brushed her hair back and said, "I see you, Violet, and there is grace in you, more than anyone else I have met." She threw her arms around his neck before she could think. He held her like she had never been held. And she knew, without a doubt, she was falling in love with the only man who had ever seen her as more than a burden. The first snow came early that year, dusting the pine slopes east of the Norwood ranch and turning the dirt path from town into a pale ribbon. Jasper had just finished securing the last of the hay beneath a canvas tarp when he spotted Violet walking up the lane, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders and a small parcel clutched to her chest. "You'll catch cold dressed like that," he said, meeting her at the gate, his breath visible in the sharp air. "I had to bring this before the sun went down," she said, holding out the bundle. "It's the ledger from the bank. They asked for signatures on the land grant papers, but I didn't want to send them by anyone else." He took the packet, careful not to brush her hand. "You trust me with this?" "I do." The words were simple, but they held something that hadn't lived in her voice before. He saw it and didn't press. Instead, he motioned toward the porch, where a lantern already glowed behind the window pane. Inside, the warmth of the stove seeped into her fingers as she unwrapped her scarf. The house still smelled of split pine and tallow candles, but there was a pot of stew simmering on the back burner, and she heard the soft whistle of steam from the kettle. "You've made this place feel different," she said, easing into the rocker near the fire. "It used to echo." He sat across from her, stretching out his long legs. "It helps having someone to cook for, even if she only eats half her bowl." She smiled faintly. "I never did have much appetite, not after my father passed. Mama died when I was 6, and after that. Food wasn't something you sat down for. It was just something to finish before someone noticed you'd taken too long." Jasper watched her in the firelight, the shadows softening the sharp lines of her face. "You ever leave Fort Benton before?" "No," she said. "No reason to." "The Norwood name doesn't mean much anymore, not without cattle to carry it." "It can mean something again," he said. "If that's what you want." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know what I want." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You ever think about staying out here full time?" "Not just visiting after bakery hours." She hesitated. "I'd be underfoot. I drop things. I get in the way." "You don't," he said. "You're the reason this place still has a name to sign on papers. I wouldn't know the first thing about running livestock." "I do." "You'd learn." Her eyes lingered on the flames. "I'd have to stop working in town. You'd have a different kind of work here." The kettle began to boil. Jasper stood, poured 2 cups, and handed one to her. She sipped, letting the heat rest against her lips. "I don't remember the last time someone made me tea," she said. "I don't remember the last time I wanted to." She glanced up, startled. He didn't look away. "You're quiet, Jasper Ellery. Most horses don't respond well to shouting." "Neither do most people." She gave a soft laugh, not mocking, just surprised. "You ever been married?" "No," he said. "I had a few chances, but none I could stay honest in." "Why not?" He shrugged. "My father drank himself mean. I got used to keeping distance." She nodded slowly. "My father never raised a hand, but he didn't notice much either. I could have vanished some days and he wouldn't have known till supper." They sat with that for a moment, the kind of silence that asked nothing more than to be shared. "Why'd you come here?" she asked. "Really? I was tired of sleeping in barns and riding for men who'd sell their brothers for a better brand. I wanted land, yes, but I also wanted to build something that could last." She studied him. "And you think this place could be that?" "I know it can." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "And if I stayed, I'd build it with you?" The wind shifted outside, brushing snow against the window panes. She didn't answer right away, but he saw the change in her posture, the way her shoulders eased, the way she looked him in the eyes without flinching. "Then teach me," she said. "If you're willing." "I am," Jasper said, rising to stoke the fire. "And I'll keep teaching as long as you keep showing up." Something loosened in her chest, not all the way, not yet, but enough. She rose, stepping beside him, and laid a hand lightly on his arm. "Then I'll be back tomorrow." Before dawn, he met her gaze. "I'll have coffee waiting." The next morning, she did come before the frost melted, apron tucked into her coat pocket, boots muddy from the walk, and when he handed her the reins to a skittish bay mare, she didn't hesitate, not even once. The wind sharpened in late November, blowing dry needles off the lodgepole pines and sending them skittering across the yard like brittle insects. Jasper's coat was patched at the elbows, but he wore it without complaint as he hauled water from the well. Violet stood nearby, sleeves rolled to her elbows, scrubbing the inside of a wooden pail with lion grit. "You ever work with livestock in the snow?" he asked, tipping the bucket into the trough. She shook her head. "I've never worked with livestock at all. You've got a steady hand for it." "That bay mare trusts you quicker than most." Violet cast him a look. "You think that's because I talk to her like she's the baker's cat?" He grinned, teeth white against his wind-chapped face. "Probably helps." She rinsed the pail and set it upside down on the fence rail. "I didn't think I'd last more than a week out here, but I sleep better now, even with the coyotes howling." "They won't come close," Jasper said, straightening, "not with the lanterns lit, and I keep a rifle behind the door." "I know," she said. "I've seen it." He studied her. "That frighten you?" "No," she said. "Just reminds me I'm not in town anymore." He nodded. "You're not, and you don't have to be." They walked toward the barn, boots crunching over frost-hardened earth. Inside, the air was close and warm, thick with the scent of straw and leather oil. Jasper reached for a bridle hanging on a wooden peg. "I was thinking," he said, "come spring we could try for calves. There's a neighbor 2 ridges over Cooper who runs Angus. He owes me a favor." She leaned against the stall, watching him check the bridle's stitching. "What would that cost?" "Just a share of the first year's weaning. He's got more bulls than pasture." "And you trust him?" "Enough to start small." Violet ran a hand along the stall door, rough wood catching her palm. "I've never owned anything that breathes." "Not really." "You could," Jasper said, voice quiet. "I don't know what I'd do with that kind of responsibility." "You'd rise to meet it," he said, "like you have every morning since you came." She looked away, cheeks flushed from more than the cold. "I dropped a whole bucket of oats on Monday." "And you cleaned it up, then brought more." She hesitated. "You always make things sound easier than they are." "No," he said. "I just see how hard you make them look because no one ever showed you different." She pulled her shawl tighter. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm going to ruin everything just by breathing wrong." He didn't laugh, didn't even smile, just stepped closer, his voice low and even. "Then breathe here. Where it doesn't matter if your hands shake or your boots drag or the tea goes cold." Violet looked up, eyes glassy. "I've never known a man who waited for me to speak." "I'll wait as long as it takes," he said, her lips trembled. Then, softly, "Would you teach me to saddle her?" "Properly?" He nodded once. "Come on then." They worked in tandem, Jasper explaining each step, how the cinch should lie flat, how to feel for the withers, how to check the buckle without watching it. She moved slow, careful, but her hands didn't tremble this time. When the saddle was secure, she stepped back. "She didn't flinch." "She wouldn't," he said. "She knows you're gentle." Violet glanced at him. "You always say things like that, like being careful's a strength." "It is," he said. "Anyone can break a horse. Not everyone can earn one's trust." They stood in the stall a moment longer, the mare swishing her tail softly behind them. Then Violet turned. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Riding out, sleeping under the sky, moving on when you get tired of a place." He shook his head. "Not anymore." "Why not?" He hesitated, then answered plainly. "Because there's steadiness here, not just the land, you." Her breath caught and she looked down at her boots. "I'm not all that steady. You're learning," he said. "And I'm not going anywhere." She glanced up, eyes searching. "You mean that?" He stepped closer, slow and sure. "I do." Violet nodded, slow at first, then with growing certainty. "Then I'll keep learning." Jasper smiled, but only with his eyes. "That's all I ask." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting gold across the snow-crusted fields. And for the first time in years, Violet felt like the day had ended with something still whole inside her. The ground had hardened overnight, the kind of freeze that turned creek water to glass and made the barn doors stick in their frames. Jasper struck the heel of his hand against the latch until it gave with a groan, and Violet stepped in behind him, arms full of dry feed sacks. She had risen before the sun, her hair still damp from washing, pinned back in a loose coil that brushed her collar. "I found more of your mother's things," she said, setting the sacks down near the workbench. In the bottom of the tall cupboard, there were letters, mostly some dried herbs, a few jars still sealed. Jasper's brow furrowed. "I didn't know anything of hers was left. They were packed careful," she said, brushing her hands clean on her skirt. "Wrapped in calico, someone meant to keep them safe." He leaned against the stall rail, considering. "She used to make poultices when my father got kicked by a mule. Said everything had a cure if you knew where to look." "One of the jars still had comfrey in it," Violet said. "Dried but clean. I could try to steep some if you've got a kettle that doesn't leak." He nodded. "Top shelf above the hearth. Enamel's chipped, but it holds." She leaned a hip against the bench. "I didn't expect her handwriting to look like yours." Jasper looked up. "You read them?" "Only the top one. It was addressed to you." He said nothing for a long breath. Then, quietly, "I was 16 when she passed. She used to leave notes when she couldn't sleep. Said words came easier in the dark. She wrote about the river bend," Violet said, "about how you used to bring her smooth stones and say they were lucky. I thought if I gave her enough, something would change. You were just a boy," she said. "I knew more than I let on." Violet stepped closer, her hands folded. "You don't speak of her much." "I never had anyone to speak to." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you want the letters back?" "No," he said gently. "You keep them." She'd have liked that. The horses shifted behind them, hooves muffled in the straw. Outside, the wind picked up, slicing around the eaves with a whistle. Violet turned toward the door, then paused. "There's a sewing machine in town," she said. "Mr. Hemsley's widow is selling it. I thought if we had one, I could make seat pads for the wagon, maybe mend the coats before they tear through." Jasper met her gaze. "You'd have to give up the last of your wages for that." "I already have," she said. "I traded the bakery ledger for credit." "They'll hold it until Friday." He studied her. "You didn't ask me first." "I didn't think I needed permission." "You don't," he said. "You never did." She smiled, small and sure. "Then I'll bring it here before the weather turns worse. You'll need help lifting it." "I'll ask the miller's boy," she said. "He owes me a favor." Jasper's jaw twitched. "You trust him to handle it gentle?" "No," she said, "but I trust you to meet me halfway." He reached for his coat. "Then I'll be waiting at the edge of town." She tilted her head. "You always meet me where I am." "It's not hard," he said. "You never ask for more than what's fair." Violet's eyes warmed. "You make it easier to ask." He took a step closer, his voice low. "What else would you ask if I could give it?" She looked at his hands, calloused and weathered. "Maybe a room that's warm even when the fire dies. A place to keep books upright and shoes by the door. Mornings that start without rush. That's all," her voice dropped. "And company." "Yours." Jasper's breath fogged between them. "Then I'll build that room first." She nodded, eyes shimmering. "I'll help you measure." No more words passed between them. He opened the barn door, and she stepped out into the pale light ahead of him, as she always did now, not leading, not following, but walking with him through the cold. And he followed, steady as the frost beneath their boots. A sharp wind rolled down from the Bear Paw Mountains, carrying the scent of wood smoke and snow. Jasper leaned into it as he saw Violet crest the ridge on foot, her skirt caught in the breeze, cheeks red from the climb. Behind her, the miller's boy struggled under the weight of the sewing machine crated in pine slats, his breath puffing like a steam kettle. Jasper stepped forward, lifting the box without a word and nodding his thanks. The boy gave a sideways glance at Violet, then turned back down the trail without waiting for dismissal. "He asked if I needed help getting it inside," Violet said as she followed Jasper down the slope. "I told him you'd already built the better half of a home around me." Jasper didn't look back, but his voice carried. "That true?" She caught up beside him. "It is now." The house had changed. The lean-to shed had been pulled down and rebuilt into a room with windows on both sides and a stovepipe that curled like a question mark into the sky. Jasper had paneled the inside with salvaged planks from the old grain store, the walls still bearing traces of stenciled inventory marks. The floor was new, tight-laid pine that smelled of sap when warmed. He set the box gently near the window, then straightened. You'll want this on a table so the wheel clears. I've got one in the barn that'll do. I'll sew near the light, she said. And keep the kettle warm. They didn't speak for a while. She unpacked the parts with careful hands, wiping each with a cloth dipped in lamp oil. He hammered the last nail into the window trim, then stood with his hands braced on his hips. Folk in town know you're staying, I told Mrs. Dallow I wouldn't be back after the new year, she said. She didn't ask why. She won't come looking for you. I don't think anyone will, she said. But it doesn't matter, I've chosen where I belong. He turned and something in his expression shifted. You sure of that? She looked up. You think I haven't earned the right to be, I think, he said, stepping toward her, that you don't give yourself enough credit for how far you've come. I know how far I've come, she said. I just didn't know someone would be waiting. He reached out, brushing a speck of dust from her shoulder. I didn't know I was waiting, not until you stayed. She leaned into the touch. You were right, about how quiet isn't the same as alone, his voice lowered. You're not alone now. She looked into his face, and for the first time she didn't feel like she had to lower her eyes. Then don't keep sleeping in the lean-to. It's your house. It's ours, she said. And there's no sense in keeping two beds when one's warmer. He didn't answer for a moment. Then, carefully, you want that, she nodded. I want you beside me when the kettle hisses and the fire dies down and morning comes again, he exhaled slow. Then that's where I'll be. They spent the rest of the afternoon setting the room in order. He brought in the table cut to fit the sewing machine's base. She hung a strip of muslin at the window. When the light faded, they sat side by side at the hearth, knees touching, listening to the wind whistle through the pines. I want to plant a garden come spring, she said. Nothing big, just something that roots. We'll fence it from the deer. And I'd like curtains, she added. Something with color. You'll make them, he said. She smiled. Yes, I will. That night they lay in the same bed for the first time. There were no declarations, no grand gestures, just his hand finding hers beneath the quilt and her breath evening out in the rhythm of his. The days that followed came quiet and steady. They mended a broken gate, traded eggs for flour, and dug a trench to divert runoff from the barn. Violet learned to drive the wagon by herself, and Jasper taught her how to read the sky for storms. They had no visitors, but neither of them minded. The stillness felt earned. Winter settled deep, but their house stayed warm. She kept jars on the windowsill, wild rose hips, dried mint, and the last of her mother's comfrey. He carved hooks for her sewing ribbons and fixed the latch on the kitchen drawer that always caught. They did not speak of the past. There was no need. It had already fallen behind them like the thawed tracks of a wagon long gone. The land held them, and they held each other. Years later, when neighbors began calling it the Ellery place, Violet didn't correct them. She only smiled and said, yes. That's right. And Jasper, always nearby, would tip his hat and add, best land I ever worked. They grew old the way the trees did, slowly, with deep roots and wide branches, and they never left, not once.